Hi, I'm Patti. I'm a jewelry designer here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads. And today we're going to be making this really cool Western necklace. The Western style is really popular, and a lot of us think about rodeo when we think Western jewelry, but people wear it all the time now. It's great to wear with your everyday favorite jeans outfit, or you can dress it up with a little black dress. Whatever you want to do with it, we're seeing it all over the place. And I wanted to show you how to make this really fun piece. This one is a strung necklace, so we'll be doing some stringing on the AccuFlex. And then it's got this really cool wire-worked pendant on it. And we'll be using some parawire to do the wire work on that with this really cute horseshoe charm. So let's go ahead and look at some of the items that we'll be using in the piece. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out for a second. Pull in the little tray. So we're going to be using sodalite as our base stone here, the gemstone. So we've got some sodalite chips and rondelles, and we've got this great sodalite square kind of puffed focal. Of course, the cute horseshoe charm. We've got a very simple little figure 8 hook clasp here, and our stringing elements. We're going to also be using some crystal bicones, some little metal rondelles, and we're all good to go. Okay, so let's start by making this focal piece, this cute little pendant. So the wire work on this is really simple. It looks a little complicated, but it's not very hard to do. A beginner can do this. So this is actually 2 different pieces of wire. The bottom piece is just a very simple ice pick bail that goes through 2 holes here at the bottom of the piece. And you can see in this sodalite rectangle there are 2 holes on either side that go straight through. And then the top one, the wire runs through, up and around, and we spiral it, and we're going to hammer it for a little extra effect. Okay, so let's start with this cute little ice pick bail here. So I'm going to grab my parawire and just snip off a bit. This is a little more than we'll need, but that's okay. I'll trim the ends later. And in the center of the wire, I'm just going to take my round nose pliers and just center those on the natural curve of the wire, just like that. And I'm going to push them opposite each other, just like that. So we have this little loop with the tails going in either direction, and you can see that's what we have here. And then I'm just going to bring that around on either side. Don't need a lot of fancy tools to do that. You just need to kind of gauge the size, and we'll put that right up against our piece here. And then I'm going to take the chain nose plier and right kind of near that curve, I'm going to bend that in about the same level. And I'll just do a little bit of adjusting. It looks like this one's bent a little higher, so I'll bend that a little more. That looks just about right. Okay, so what I want to end up with is a little ice pick bail where the ends are going to run through the stone part way on either side. I want them to run far enough in where they'll stay in the stone, but not so far in that they hit each other. So I'll probably snip it off about right there. And on the other side, I'll mirror that and snip it off right about there. All right. Now I'm just going to open that up a little bit, widen that out, and put one side through one of the holes, and then the other side through another hole on the bottom here. And I'm just going to use my fingers to squeeze those together. And there you have that. And if you want to adjust it a little bit, you can use your pliers. Kind of pull it around a little bit so it looks just like you would like it. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. And then we'll just take this cute little horseshoe charm and attach that with a jump ring. So to open the jump ring, I always like to open them sideways. That's really the best way to do that. So I'll put that in my plier and I'll reposition it. So half of the jump ring is in my bent chain nose here. You can use regular chain nose too, but I like the bents for this. And I'll put lots of pressure and I'm just going to open that sideways. Put on one element, put on the other element, and then close it up the way I opened it. And I like to rock the tips back and forth till I get a nice tight connection so there's no space in the jump ring. And there we have the bottom part of that piece. So let's go ahead and make this top wire worked part here with the spiral. So I'm just going to pull off some wire. And the spiral takes up a little space, so pull off just a little more than you think. And the materials list for this is available, so you can check that out and get the exact amounts to cut. All right, so what I'm going to do is take this wire and run it through the top hole. And I'm not going to quite center it. I need more wire on one side to make that spiral width on this right-hand side. So I'm going to leave 2/3 of the wire over on this side and about 1/3 on this side. Then I'm just going to arc them up and around like that. All right. Just kind of make it the shape that I want it to be. And if you like a different shape, you can make a different shape. The creativity is really up to you. I feel like that's about what I would like. All right, so this is real simple. I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and right at the arc here, this shorter wire, I'm going to bend it upwards, just like that. And then I am going to bend it toward me just a little bit. And then I'm going to use my round nose plier and I'm going to make a loop by pushing that against the plier all the way around. And then I'll take that top barrel out and put the bottom barrel in. And I'm going to kind of massage it around this way because we have to get around the other wire that's there. And I'm just going to make a loop like that. And then I'm going to snip off my loop. Now these are my flush cutters. The outside of my flush cutters here leaves a nice clean edge. So I want the outside against the piece that I'm keeping. So I'm going to flip that around and snip off the tail there. Then I'm going to just take that loop and make sure that it's a nice tight close. So it's a nice closed loop like that. Okay, now that I've got the sides finished and I've got the loop at the top, I'm going to pull the wire around just like that and create a little spiral. And I'm not going to create it right against the piece because I'm going to have to hammer that out. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers and kind of right about here, I'm going to start making a little spiral. Just like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. A little rough look is kind of nice. All right. That looks good. Now, what I'm going to do is take my chain nose pliers and I'm going to kind of flatten that spiral, and I'm going to bring it out at an angle because we want to hammer that spiral. So I'm going to actually bring it out here. Then I'm going to bring in my block, and we don't want to hammer this little juncture where the wires cross over. We want to hammer the rest of the loops. So I'm going to go ahead and take my hammer and flatten that out. And flip it over and give it a little texture. Okay, then we'll flip it back in, just like that, and reposition it as you like it. Kind of fix it up here a little bit. And then when you hammer, the wire moves out of place a little bit, so just adjust everything back where you want it before you finish up. That's looking really good. Then I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, and right here towards the edge, I am going to grab this wire and kind of push it around the plier so I have a nice rounded bend. Flip that over backwards, and I'm going to kind of bring it all the way around so I have a nice rounded bend all the way to the back. And then I'm going to take my flush cutter and I'm just going to snip off that wire right about there. And I'll just take my chain nose and bend that in so the tail is kind of touching and it's not sticking out. And there you have your really great little focal element. And that's ready to string when we do the stringing part of the necklace. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that aside. And then let's look at doing the stringing. So we've got several little strands here that are strung together. We've got a center strand and two outside strands that are identical here. So let's start with one of the outside strands. I'm just going to push everything out of the frame for now because we just want to make this one. Okay, so let's start with some AccuFlex. This is what we're stringing on. And we're going to pull off a length of the AccuFlex. I always pull off a couple inches more than what I think I need. You always want to have a little more than a little less when the AccuFlex because you have to have a little extra to work the ends with. Okay. So let's go ahead and make one crimped end so we can get ready to string. So in order to do that, I am going to use a crimp bead. Here's some of my little crimp beads. Even though this piece is gold, I've got sterling silver crimp beads. I really, really enjoy them. They crimp down really well. They hold well, and they're more malleable than the base metal. So if I'm going to go to a little extra expense on anything in a crimped piece like this, it's always the bead. I really, really like the sterling ones. Makes a huge difference. All right, so we've got our crimp bead on there, and then let's get our little AccuGuard. It looks like a little horseshoe, which is very appropriate for the piece. The horseshoe has two little ends on it with holes in them, and you just thread your AccuFlex through one of the holes, and then you pull the AccuFlex around that little horseshoe and thread it back through the hole on the other side, and that protects your wire. Also gives you a nice finished look to the piece. Okay. So I've got my crimp bead right up against my AccuGuard there. Now I'm going to take my crimping plier and I'm just going to close up that little horseshoe a little bit so I get a nice tighter fit. And then I'm going to use the crimping channel here and grab the crimp bead. I'm going to push it right up tight against the AccuGuard, and then I'm going to back it off 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeters and crimp it tight. The reason that I back it off is because I need to leave space for the crimp cover that's going to go around that crimp bead. So now I'm going to go in a little circle on the outside channel here and round out my crimp bead, make sure it's nice and tight. And before I put the crimp cover on, I'm going to tug on it, and I just want to test it. Really nice. Now I'm going to grab my crimp cover, and the way that I like to do it, it's actually a little easier off the palm of my hand, is to use the outside channel of the crimp tool, grab the crimp cover. Oh, you know what? I'm going to cut that tail first. Always better to cut the tail off first. Make sure you're only cutting the tail you want to lose there. All right. Then go around your crimp bead and crimp it gently closed. And then you have to go around in a little bit of a circle to get a rounded look with your crimp cover. Just have to kind of massage it closed. Okay, so we have one good crimped end and we're ready to string. I'm going to start at this end here, and we have a metal rondelle and then an opalized bicone and another metal rondelle. Sometimes it's actually easier to pick them up right off the mat. Sometimes. So I might try that. With little tiny 4 millimeter beads like this, it just is easier sometimes. All right, so next in my pattern is one of the smaller blue bicones. And then we've got a Socialize chip. Then we've got one of the larger blue bicones, a Socialize rondelle, another one of the large blue bicones, another chip. And I really like to grab random chips. I think it makes it much more fun looking if they're not so planned out. Gives it that really great kind of rough Western look with a really refined crystal. It's a great contrast. And then we've got a smaller blue bicone. Got one of the metal rondelles. Oops. Yeah, it's easier to get them off the mat. One of the blue opal bicones. And I'm just going to check my pattern, make sure that I'm doing what I want to do. I sure am. And I'm just going to continue this pattern, and I'll be right back at the end. Okay, so now we've got the whole section strung. Let's go ahead and finish off this section by crimping it. So we'll start by threading on one of the little crimp beads, and then threading on an AccuGuard. And we went through one side of the horseshoe, around through the other side, and then you have to remember to go through that crimp bead again with this other tail. Pull that nice and tight. And then I'm going to take my crimp plier And I'm going to close up the little horseshoe so the edges touch. Pull that nice and tight. So there's a little trick when you're crimping something like this. You don't want it to get too tight. You want it to have a little flow, but you don't want to have an extra space. So pull it nice and tight. And once you've got it nice and tight, I like to kind of massage it around a little bit and make sure that it's going to be able to drape well. And then go to the end here and just make sure there's not a lot of slack. And I've got just a little bit of slack up there, which is what I want because I want to be able to put the crimp cover on. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that in the channel there and crimp it closed. And I'm going to go around to the other side. I'm going to crimp from the opposite angle. And I'm going to kind of go around in the circle and just make sure that it's nice and tight. And then I'm going to test it. It's good. So I'm going to snip off the tail. All right. And then we'll add the crimp cover to the crimp bead. So I like to just put it in the palm of my hand. I feel like I have more control there. And grab it with the crimp pliers like that. Just make sure it's nice and centered there. Make sure that the crimp bead is all the way in there. Close it up and then just kind of massage it around in a circle to round it out and close it all the way. Okay, so we have the first strung section. Now you can see that there's a little rondelle link there. So we'll go ahead and make that link. And then we'll start stringing the middle section. So to make this link, I just used an eye pin. We'll just grab one of the rondelles, string that on the eye pin, just like that. And then grab your chain nose pliers. And in the same direction of the original loop there on the other end, we're going to bend the wire away. So we have a nice bend. Grab your round nose pliers, and we're just going to push that wire around the plier. Take the top barrel out, put the bottom barrel in, and pull your wire all the way around. So you have a nice little rounded eye there. And I'm just going to, it's a little bit off round, so I'm going to round it out before I cut it. Feel better about that. Then I'm going to take my flush cutter and get right in there and snip the tail off. And then we have a nice open loop. We can go ahead and add that on there. Take my chain nose pliers and close it up, nice tight connection. Okay. So we've got the first section, the first link. Let's start the middle section where the pendant will go. So we're going to grab another length of AccuFlex and snip that off. So we've got our AccuGuard, our crimp cover, and our crimp bead. These are the building blocks of a crimped end. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my crimp bead. And then I'm going to go through one end of the AccuGuard. And then I'm going to kind of clamp the wire down here so the crimp bead doesn't fall off. And go around to the other side through the hole. And then put the tail back through the crimp bead. So we've got both tails going through that. And then you want to kind of pull it all taut. Use your crimping pliers to close up the little horseshoe so the ends touch. grab that crimp bead and pull it all tight. Back off just a millimeter or so and crimp that tight. Okay. And then just tug on it and make sure it's good. Always test out your crimps before you string your necklace. Okay, there we go. And I'll grab my crimp plier and my little C-shaped crimp cover. Get that in the plier and then put that around my crimp bead and just round it out nicely. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add this to my link now. So I'm just going to open up that end of the link, put that through, and then close it up sideways so it's nice and tight. All right, and then we'll continue this pattern right up until we get to the pendant. So we'll start with the lighter blue bicone, a metal rondelle, and then one of the smaller blue bicones. A chip, the larger blue bicone, a rondelle, and one of the larger blue bicones, another chip, it's coming along nicely. I'm just going to check my pattern, make sure it all looks good. It does. A smaller blue bicone, one of the little metal rondelles, one of the light blue bicones, and right before we put the pendant on, we end with one of the larger blue bicones. Okay, so I am always checking for assurance to make sure I'm feeling good about the pattern that we're creating. It's looking just right. It's time to get our pendant that we created. And I'm going to take the end of the AccuFlex and go right through the pendant. I'm going to check and make sure that juncture is nice and tight. It is. If there's any space there, it will come right out. Okay. So we've got our necklace half strung. Now I'm going to mirror this pattern on the other side and I will be right back. Now we have the whole center section strung. Let's go ahead and crimp that off. So we'll go through a little crimp bead. And through one side of the AccuGuard. Around through the other side of the AccuGuard. And then the tail through the crimp bead again. Okay. Pull that all nice and tight. Let's close up that horseshoe. And then tighten it. Make sure that it easily moves. Grab that crimp bead and then back that off about 1 millimeter, crimp tight. And from a couple of directions, go around to make sure it's really nice and tight. Do that little test. It's good. And then cut off that tail. Then grab a crimp cover. Put it around your crimp bead and close it up. Kind of go around in a circle, massage that closed nicely. Okay, so you have your center section, and then I've already made this mirrored section here with the links, so let's go ahead and open up that link, and we'll add it to the other side. Close that up. Okay, so there we have our strung necklace. All we need to do is add the clasp. So here's our clasp. Let's grab a couple of jump rings. See, we use the little jump rings for that. There we go. So I'll grab my bent chain nose pliers, one of those jump rings in the plier, and then I'll kind of reposition it. I want the little opening right at the top, just like that. And I'm going to torque it open sideways. Add one end of my necklace, and then I'll add the hook here. And then kind of rock those ends back and forth, get a nice tight connection. And then I'll do the same thing with the second jump ring. Open that up. Put on the end of my necklace, put on the little figure 8 end of the clasp, and rock the jump ring ends together. And we can see that the clasp works nicely, and we have this beautiful Western necklace, great for your everyday jeans wear, for dress up and go wear, anything that you want it to be. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm so glad that you were here to learn this technique. I hope that you found inspiration from it. We have a whole bevy of start to finish projects on our website, so make sure and check that out. Make sure and like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.